One day you bend down to tie your shoes and suddenly feel it, that deep, unfamiliar ache in your back or knees, and in that quiet moment a question flashes through your mind. When did my own body start pushing back? Nothing dramatic happened, no fall, no injury, yet something has clearly changed. After 45, pain doesn't arrive as an enemy, it arrives as a message, and once you understand why your body begins to speak this way, you realize it isn't breaking down at all. It's revealing a truth about how time, biology, and life have been shaping you all along. After 45, one of the earliest and quietest changes happens deep inside the body, far away from where pain is actually felt. The joints, muscles, tendons, and even the skin are held together by collagen, a protein that once behaved like a soft, flexible net, stretching and rebounding without effort. In youth, collagen fibers are well hydrated, neatly organized, and constantly renewed, which is why movement feels smooth and forgiving. As the years pass, this renewal slows, not suddenly, but gradually enough that most people don't notice it until stiffness becomes part of the morning routine. Science shows that collagen molecules begin forming extra crosslinks with age, making the tissue tougher but less elastic, like fabric left too long in the sun. This stiffness is not damage, it is adaptation, the body choosing durability over flexibility after decades of use. At the same time, the water content inside connective tissue quietly decreases. Joints rely on fluid not just for lubrication, but for nutrition, because cartilage has no direct blood supply. When movement was frequent and varied earlier in life, this fluid circulated easily, feeding the cartilage with every step and stretch. With age and more sedentary habits, circulation within the joint slows, and cartilage becomes thinner and drier. This doesn't mean the joint is failing. It means it is receiving less daily stimulation. The result is a sensation of tightness or discomfort when standing up after sitting, a reminder that motion itself is part of the joint's survival system. Muscles are also woven with collagen, and as its quality changes, muscles transmit force differently. Instead of smoothly absorbing impact, they pass more stress directly to joints and bones. This is why movements that once felt effortless now feel heavier, even when strength hasn't dramatically declined. The body is still strong, but the shock absorbers have aged. Tendons, which connect muscle to bone, become slightly thicker and stiffer as well, reducing their ability to store and release energy. This makes movements feel less springy and more deliberate, and it can create the illusion that the body is weaker, when in reality it is simply less elastic. Another layer of this process involves repair. In younger years, microscopic tears in collagen fibers heal quickly, often within hours, guided by growth hormones and abundant cellular energy. After midlife, these repair signals still exist but move more slowly. The body becomes selective, prioritizing essential repairs over perfect restoration. This means small imperfections accumulate, not as injuries, but as history written into tissue. Each ache represents a place that has worked faithfully for years and now asks for more time, more warmth, and more thoughtful movement. Even posture begins to change subtly because of collagen remodeling. The spine, supported by ligaments rich in collagen, loses a small degree of flexibility. This can alter alignment by tiny amounts that shift how weight is distributed through the hips, knees, and feet. The brain senses these changes and responds by increasing muscle tension for stability, which can further compress joints and increase discomfort. Pain, in this sense, is not coming from one structure alone, but from a conversation between tissues adapting at different speeds. What makes this process feel alarming is not the science itself, but the expectation we carry that the body should feel the same forever. Biologically, the body after 45 is not designed for constant high performance, but for efficiency and preservation. Collagen becomes tougher to protect joints from instability, even if that protection feels like stiffness. Understanding this reframes pain not as a sign of decay, but as evidence of a system choosing caution over risk, resilience over speed, shaped by years of movement, stress, rest, and survival rather than sudden failure. As the body moves through midlife, another powerful shift unfolds inside the muscles themselves, one that is less visible than wrinkles or weight changes, yet deeply influential in how the body feels each day. Muscles are not just engines for movement. They are living tissues that constantly sense, adapt, and communicate with the nervous system. After 45, the balance between muscle building and muscle breakdown slowly changes direction. The body still produces new muscle fibers, but the signals that stimulate growth become quieter, while the signals that conserve energy grow stronger. This shift is not a flaw in design, but a biological strategy meant to protect long-term survival in a body that has already carried years of physical demand. One of the most important changes occurs in the muscle fibers responsible for stability and endurance. These fibers support posture, protect joints, and keep movements smooth and controlled. With age, they gradually lose size and efficiency, especially if daily life involves long periods of sitting or repetitive motions. As these stabilizing muscles weaken, larger muscles are forced to compensate, creating imbalances that subtly alter how the body moves. The brain senses this instability and responds by increasing muscle tension, particularly around the neck, lower back, and hips. This constant low-level tension can feel like stiffness or soreness, even in the absence of injury, because muscles are working overtime simply to hold the body upright. At the cellular level, muscle cells experience a decline in mitochondrial function. Mitochondria are the energy centers that allow muscles to contract smoothly and recover quickly. After midlife, these structures become less efficient at producing energy, especially during repetitive or sustained activity. As a result, muscles fatigue more quickly and take longer to relax after use. This lingering tension can compress nearby nerves and blood vessels, reducing circulation and creating a dull, aching sensation that feels like pain but is actually a signal of energy depletion. What once felt like a short effort now leaves a longer echo in the body. Another subtle factor is the way muscles communicate with hormones. In earlier years, hormones such as growth hormone and testosterone or estrogen helped maintain muscle mass and repair microscopic damage. After 45, levels of these hormones decline or fluctuate, slowing recovery and increasing sensitivity to stress. Muscles become more responsive to emotional tension as well as physical demand, storing stress in patterns of tightness that reflect daily pressures. This is why emotional strain can suddenly appear as physical pain, particularly in the shoulders, jaw, or lower back. The body is no longer separating mental and physical stress as cleanly as it once did. The nervous system also changes its relationship with muscles. With age, nerve signals travel slightly more slowly and less precisely, reducing coordination between muscle groups. This lack of fine control causes muscles to co-contract, meaning opposing muscles tighten at the same time instead of taking turns. While this increases joint stability, it also increases compression and friction within the joint. Over time, this protective strategy becomes uncomfortable, creating the sense that the body is always bracing itself, even during simple movements like walking or reaching. What makes this stage challenging is that pain often appears without a clear cause. People may assume they are becoming fragile or damaged, when in reality the body is adapting to new internal conditions. Muscles are shifting from a performance-focused system to a protection-focused one, prioritizing stability over speed and efficiency over power. Pain, in this context, is not a warning of failure but a message asking for a different kind of care, one that values gentle strength, conscious movement, and recovery as much as effort. When understood this way, muscle discomfort after 45 becomes less frightening and more informative, pointing toward a body that is still intelligent, responsive, and deeply invested in preserving itself for the years ahead. Another deep change that reshapes how the body feels after 45 happens within the immune system, a system most people associate only with illness but that quietly influences pain every single day. In youth, inflammation behaves like a precise emergency response team, arriving quickly to repair damage and then leaving once the job is done. As the body ages, this response becomes less punctual and less selective. The immune system remains slightly active even when there is no clear injury, producing what scientists call low-grade chronic inflammation. This is not the dramatic swelling or redness of an infection, but a subtle internal state that sensitizes tissues and nerves, making normal sensations feel heavier, sharper, or more uncomfortable than they once did. This background inflammation changes how joints and muscles experience movement. Chemical messengers released by immune cells interact directly with pain receptors, lowering their threshold for activation. This means sensations that were once neutral, like stretching after sitting or walking upstairs, are now interpreted as discomfort. The tissue itself may not be damaged, yet the nervous system receives a louder signal. Pain in this case is not a sign of harm, but a change in perception, shaped by an immune system that has learned to stay alert after decades of exposure to stress, toxins, poor sleep, and repeated minor injuries. At the same time, the gut begins to play a larger role in how pain is experienced. The immune system is closely linked to the digestive system, and after midlife, changes in gut bacteria can increase inflammatory signals throughout the body. Diets high in refined foods, chronic stress, and slower digestion all influence this balance. When the gut barrier becomes slightly more permeable, immune cells react more often, releasing inflammatory molecules that circulate through muscles and joints. The result is a sense of whole body soreness that seems to have no single source, leaving people confused and frustrated because nothing feels obviously wrong, yet nothing feels fully right either. Sleep also becomes more fragile with age, and this directly affects inflammation. Deep sleep is one of the primary times when inflammatory signals are cleared and tissues are restored. After 45, sleep cycles often become shorter and lighter, reducing this nightly reset. Even small sleep disruptions can increase inflammatory activity the next day, amplifying pain sensitivity. This creates a cycle where discomfort interferes with sleep, and poor sleep increases discomfort, reinforcing the feeling that pain is becoming a permanent companion rather than a temporary visitor. Perhaps the most profound shift occurs in how the brain interprets inflammatory signals. The brain is not a passive receiver of pain. It actively predicts and shapes the experience based on past information. After years of minor aches, injuries, and stress, the brain becomes more cautious. It begins to interpret inflammatory signals as threats, even when tissue damage is minimal. This protective behavior evolved to prevent injury, but in modern life it can lead to persistent pain patterns. The brain learns pain as a habit, not consciously, but biologically, strengthening neural pathways that make discomfort easier to trigger and harder to ignore. This explains why scans and tests often fail to show a clear cause for pain after midlife. The issue is not always in the structure of the body, but in the sensitivity of the system that monitors it. Inflammation acts like static in a communication channel, and the brain responds by increasing the volume to make sure nothing important is missed. What the person experiences is pain that feels real and limiting, even though the body is not breaking down in the way they fear. Understanding this changes the emotional relationship with pain. Instead of viewing it as an enemy or a punishment for aging, pain can be seen as an overprotective signal from a system that has carried the body through decades of life. It is the immune system remembering everything it has encountered and choosing caution. When approached with calm awareness, movement, nourishment, and rest, this system can soften its response. Pain after 45 is not the body turning against you, but the body asking to be listened to differently, with patience rather than fear, and with curiosity rather than resistance. As the body ages, one of the most underestimated changes happens not in the joints or muscles themselves, but in the way the brain interprets the body. Pain is not created solely in tissues. It is constructed in the nervous system as a protective experience. After 45, the brain becomes more vigilant, drawing on a lifetime of physical memories, injuries, emotional stress, and learned patterns. This heightened vigilance is not weakness or decline, but an adaptive strategy. The brain has learned that recovery takes longer and that risks carry higher costs, so it begins to predict discomfort earlier and more often in order to protect the body from potential harm. Over the years, every strain, fall, illness, and period of stress leaves a neurological imprint. These experiences shape how sensory signals are processed. After midlife, the brain relies more heavily on prediction than sensation, meaning it often anticipates pain before damage occurs. This can create the feeling that pain appears without cause, or that small movements trigger outsized discomfort. The body may be structurally stable, yet the nervous system responds as if it is fragile. This process is known as central sensitization, where the brain amplifies signals from the body to ensure safety, even when the threat is low. This shift is closely linked to stress regulation. As people age, the stress response system becomes less flexible. Hormones like cortisol may remain elevated for longer periods, keeping the nervous system in a state of mild alertness. This constant readiness sensitizes pain pathways, making them easier to activate. Emotional stress, worry, or unresolved tension can therefore manifest as physical pain, particularly in areas that already feel vulnerable. The brain does not distinguish sharply between emotional and physical threat. Both are processed through similar networks, which is why psychological strain can feel like bodily ache. Another factor is the changing balance between movement and caution. Earlier in life, the brain rewards exploration and physical challenge, encouraging movement through positive feedback. After 45, this reward system becomes more conservative. The brain prioritizes stability and predictability, sometimes at the cost of comfort. It may restrict movement by generating pain signals to prevent actions it perceives as risky. This can lead to stiffness and reduced activity, which ironically reinforces pain by limiting circulation and sensory variety. The body becomes trapped in a loop where pain leads to less movement, and less movement leads to more pain. The sensory map of the body in the brain also changes with age. Areas that are used less frequently receive less precise representation. This loss of clarity can make sensations feel vague, diffuse, or unpleasant. The brain fills in the gaps with assumptions, often erring on the side of caution. As a result, discomfort may spread beyond its original location, creating the impression of widespread pain. This does not mean the pain is imagined. It means the brain is working with less detailed information and compensating through heightened sensitivity. What is often overlooked is the role of attention. After midlife, people become more aware of bodily sensations, partly because of past experiences and partly because of fear of injury or illness. Attention acts like a spotlight, intensifying whatever it illuminates. When attention repeatedly focuses on pain, neural pathways associated with that pain become stronger. Over time, pain becomes easier to notice and harder to ignore, even if the underlying signal has not increased. The brain, always efficient, reinforces what is used most often. This understanding invites a shift in perspective. Pain after 45 is not evidence that the body is failing, but that the brain is working overtime to protect it. By recognizing pain as a learned and adaptable experience, rather than a fixed condition, space opens for change. The nervous system is capable of recalibrating when it feels safe, supported, and understood. Gentle movement, reassurance, and curiosity send signals of safety that gradually quiet the alarm system. The body and brain are not in conflict. They are partners negotiating a new balance, shaped by years of experience and a deep commitment to preservation rather than performance. The final and often most misunderstood shift after 45 is not a single biological change, but the way all these systems begin to speak to each other differently, forming a new internal rhythm that asks for cooperation rather than control. In earlier years, the body tolerated imbalance with little complaint. Missed sleep, rushed meals, emotional stress, and repetitive movement were absorbed quietly, buffered by strong repair mechanisms and abundant energy. After midlife, these buffers thin, and the body becomes more honest. Pain emerges not because one system has failed, but because the margin for neglect has narrowed, and the body now requires alignment between movement, rest, nourishment, and attention. One of the clearest expressions of this is recovery time. Muscles, joints, and the nervous system still adapt and strengthen, but they do so on a slower timeline. When recovery is rushed, stress hormones remain elevated, inflammation lingers, and pain signals stay active. This can make everyday activities feel heavier, even when strength and endurance are present. The body is not resisting effort. It is asking for space between efforts. This shift challenges a lifetime of habits built around pushing through discomfort, and it often creates frustration when familiar strategies stop working as they once did. Another important element is circulation, which becomes more dependent on intentional movement. Blood flow delivers oxygen, nutrients, and immune signals that support healing, but it relies on muscle contraction and joint motion to move efficiently. After 45, prolonged stillness has a greater impact on circulation, allowing stiffness and discomfort to accumulate more quickly. The body begins to crave gentle, regular motion rather than intense, sporadic exertion. When this need is unmet, pain increases not as punishment, but as a reminder that movement is no longer optional for comfort. Emotional patterns also integrate more deeply into physical experience at this stage of life. Decades of roles, responsibilities, and unresolved stress shape how the body holds tension. Areas of chronic tightness often reflect long-held emotional states, such as responsibility carried in the shoulders or guardedness held in the hips. The nervous system no longer compartmentalizes these patterns as efficiently, allowing emotional strain to appear as physical discomfort. This is not a failure of resilience, but a sign that the body is seeking coherence between inner experience and outer action. There is also a subtle shift in identity that influences pain. Many people unconsciously measure their bodies against earlier versions of themselves, interpreting change as loss. This internal comparison creates tension, disappointment, and fear, which amplify pain signals through the nervous system. When the body is judged rather than listened to, its protective responses intensify. Pain becomes louder when it is resisted, and softer when it is acknowledged as part of an evolving relationship with the self. What science increasingly shows is that pain after midlife is highly responsive to context. Safety, meaning, and trust all influence how pain is processed. When the body feels supported through routine, nourishment, social connection, and gentle challenge, pain pathways quiet. The nervous system responds to consistency and care, recalibrating its sensitivity when it senses that the environment is predictable and non-threatening. This responsiveness explains why pain can fluctuate dramatically with stress levels, sleep quality, and emotional well-being. This stage of life invites a new kind of intelligence, one that values listening over forcing and curiosity over judgment. The body is not asking to be fixed, but to be understood within the reality of its history and present needs. Pain becomes a guide rather than an obstacle, pointing toward balance, rhythm, and respect for the interconnected systems that sustain life. When approached with patience, the body reveals that it is not declining, but transitioning into a form of wisdom where comfort arises not from domination, but from partnership between intention, biology, and awareness.